Minister, you wear multiple hats as the Defense Minister of Greece, because Greece itself is a country with multiple identities. It's, in a sense, a gateway for Asia and the Mediterranean to Europe. It's also a member of the EU. It's a member of NATO. As such, any conversation with you will cover a grand sweep. It will not just be limited to one aspect or one relationship. Let me begin right away with an issue and a theme and a geography that was in the headlines only a few days ago, but in these fast-changing news environments seems to have gone away for the moment, but I'm sure we'll come back. Have we reached the floor in terms of the transatlantic relationship, and in particular the issue of Greenland? Is there still potential for volatility, or do you think for the moment that's sorted?
Well, what should I say? First of all, let's agree on something. I'm stating, of course, the obvious, that NATO in itself, it's an alliance, a long-time enduring alliance, which guarantees sovereignty, territorial integrity in the countries that are members of NATO. Now, there was really a big discussion about Greenland. We can all agree that Greenland is very important for the transatlantic alliance. But the existing frame of treaties, especially between Denmark and the United States, allows considerable freedom to the United States in Greenland. And a few years ago, the United States had a huge number of bases in Greenland. I cannot remember the names by heart, and sometimes I mispronounce them. For example, there was one in the high north called Pitifuk, if I remember well. And then the United States downgraded its presence in Greenland by its own free will. So it is quite easy for the United States, if they wish so, to again upgrade their presence in Greenland. And that will be important for the transatlantic alliance, it will be important for the United States, it will be important for Europe. No need for all these extreme sort of discussions about sovereignty and hard power, etc., etc. I think that most probably this discussion served other political considerations and not actual defense needs. So we will be very happy if we don't see this subject reappearing in the internal dialogue within NATO or between European Union and the United States of America. We all, and by all I mean both the United States and Europe and all the countries member of NATO, are looking to have a very strong alignment and frank and sincere discussions and relations. I think Greenland is behind us now.
Let's move to something slightly wider, which is Europe's reinvestment in its own defense. That is certainly something we've seen some advance on. It's a slow-moving engine, but there is a determination to move that engine. Nobody doubts the determination, as I said, to invest in European defense in terms of both military augmentation and manufacturing capacities. But how will this play out in practice? Quite honestly, there is intent, but intent needs to overcome a legacy of inertia.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you, first of all, for not doubting the commitment, which is important. Well, again, I will be stating the obvious, that Europe, and by Europe I mean mostly the European Union countries, have left their defense behind. After the end of the Cold War, after the division in Berlin has gone away, Europe has come to believe that there's no need for defense and the American umbrella is enough. Let me give you an example on how much Europe has let its defenses down. We, Greece, are a mid-sized, maybe even small country. Yet again, the number of tanks we have are more than the tanks of the United Kingdom, of France, of Germany, of Luxembourg, of Belgium, and of the Netherlands combined. So Europe has a lot to do if it wants to address the defense challenges in the modern environment. And I have to say, it's not just a question of production lines or a question of armaments or the question of the number of armed forces or the question of the number of fighter planes. There is something much more substantial, and that will take time, and that is culture. Culture. The young generation of Europeans do not comprehend yet the need to serve the country, to serve an ideal, to serve the defense of what has been created by the European Union, which is a space of democracy, human rights, rule of law, rights of women. So we have to work very hard. By just investing money very quickly, we don't provide an answer. And even this sort of raising an investment, let us be honest between us, in order to create new production lines, it takes years. The existing safe mechanism in the European Union has one clause in it which says, whatever you invest in, you have to finish and receive it by 2030. Now, there's no way that you can create new production lines by 2030 and have the final object in use. So in the sense, what it does is it raises the prices of existing items and it raises also the stock value of existing companies. But it takes years to create, as I said before, new companies that will produce dual-use items or items that are useful for defense. Yet again, what is important is that at least the European elites and the European governments have realized the need to invest in defense, and they have realized the need to create a defense umbrella for Europe, not just rely in the United States. Of course, there's a huge item still remaining, which is nuclear. The only nuclear power in the European Union is France, and again, the force de frappe is quite limited. The other nuclear power in Europe, geographically but also culturally, is the United Kingdom, but again with limited power. So Europe has to have a huge discussion on what it does with its nuclear umbrella. And of course, we all agree in Europe that we see the European defense capacity as complementary to NATO. What we want to do is work together with NATO and work together with the United States. I just come here from Washington, D.C. I think an important part of the American establishment also subscribe to that. Huge majority there, and bipartisan, both parties. Yet again, to conclude, lots to do. Purchase of armaments or production of armaments is not enough. We have to do more in Europe, but we are on the right way.
Thank you. To go back to something you began your remarks with, that it's a question of, well, advancing defense or European defense is a question of capacities as well as culture or consciousness. Where does India come in here? Where does the India partnership come in? I ask in the context of the EU-India Security and Defense Partnership Agreement, which was concluded last month, as well as more generally.
Well, it is extremely good that this has been agreed, and I'm speaking about the security partnership. Also, what's of extreme importance is the free trade agreement, which again has been concluded recently. It is clear to me that there is an alignment of values, but as my dear friend Alexander Schallenberg just whispered to me before, there's also an alignment of interests between European Union and India. So there is fertile ground for us to enhance our cooperation. And also the fact that both areas are democracies, functioning democracies, allows this common understanding to flourish. But again, a lot of work needs to be done. Before my present capacity as Defense Minister, I was Foreign Minister of the Hellenic Republic of Greece for core countries. And one of my top priorities at that period is to create a close relation, a close understanding between Greece and India. Please don't get me wrong. I clearly understand the difference in our size. I don't punch above our weight. But please also understand that for Greeks, India, in a way, is part of the Greek mythology, like the Garden of Eden. You know, Alexander the Great came to the borders of India, and then his troops revolted, and he had to return back to Macedonia. So, in a way, the relation with India is a promise never fulfilled. So I see the current challenge as the possibility to realize that promise of 3,000 or 2,500 years ago, to create a close relation, a close understanding, to communicate, and to bring India to the Mediterranean, bring India closer to Europe, have India understand also the security challenges we face in Europe. And as it was said previously from the previous panel, if we add, we are around 2 billion people. We are by far the biggest economic power in the world. So I think it's a promise that remains to be fulfilled. And we can see it happening even in this generation.
Okay, so let me come to one other agreement that was arrived when the EU leadership was here, which is the mobility agreement. Greece is at the heart of connectivity corridors. It's astride the Mediterranean region, where migration, both legitimate and irregular in recent years, is a fact of life and has been a challenge. How do countries such as Greece see the mobility agreement with India? Any caution for India? Any advice for India?
Well, who am I to advise such a big country with such a big tradition? I can only express loudly my thoughts. But first, start with migration. Migration is a world phenomenon. It was part of what was happening in the world in the past. It will remain in the future. The big challenge for Europe is to formulate the migratory flows in a way that is beneficial both to the countries of origin and to Europe. As you know, the growth of population in Europe is almost negative, so it is clear that we need young people to fulfill the vacuum. And I think the subcontinent, with its current population structure, could be one of the best choices for legal migration. But this is something that has to be formulated in order to fight against a phenomenon that is totally disruptive, and I'm speaking about irregular or illegal migration. Yes, as most of you know, we are facing now an economic phenomenon of smuggling of people, which is huge, huge. So this has to be addressed. It has to be addressed. It's against human rights of even the irregular migrants. We need to fight the smugglers, but also we need to create corridors according to which young, ambitious people that want to work in Europe can come in Europe and profit from the European environment, but at the same time create to the European environment the economic dynamism that is necessary for the European continent to survive. You know, we called Europe the old world. Unfortunately, it's becoming quite old itself, speaking about the population. So we need, young people, but we need young people in a legal way.
My final question, Minister, it's a deep dive into the business relationship and potential between Greece and India. I work for a business consultancy called the Asia Group. We've actually worked a lot on the India-Greek corridor. When the Prime Minister of Greece was here a couple of years ago, I think 24, I traveled to Greece with a couple of my colleagues to try and interest Greek companies in India. There was a lot of interest in theory. People were willing to have conversations. As we discovered, Greek industrial and manufacturing capabilities are significant with logistics, shipbuilding, even defense manufacture, there was interest. And the potential for partnerships was there. There was also inertia because Greek companies, the big Greek conglomerates, didn't really want to get out of their comfort zone, which is Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean, parts of the Middle East. India was a nice to have, but not a must have. And we came away with the feeling, and we discussed it internally at the Asia Group, that governments were more keen than businesses. Will this trade agreement change that?
Well, thank you for this. This is a very interesting question. You will allow me a small disagreement. Maybe in the past, India was nice to have, but not necessary to have. Now, India is a necessary to have. And the free trade agreement between the European Union and India, I think, will serve that huge purpose, both for Europe, but individually for Greece as well. Greece is not, it's not a big economy. We're smaller than 250 billion euros economy per year. And also, India is exporting to Greece north than $1 billion per year. Greece, unfortunately, exports to India less than 100 million per year. So the balance is abysmal for Greece. I believe that by the free trade agreement, Greek companies and Greek entrepreneurs will be encouraged to come to the subcontinent. We Greeks have been traders for the whole of history. That's what we're doing. We trade. And by a historical oxymoron, because it cannot be explained, we have the biggest merchant navy in the world, the biggest by far. I don't know how it happened, but so it shows that trading for us with foreign countries, with foreign societies, it's within our DNA. But always India seemed as out of touch. I believe exactly because of the regulatory environment. I'm very optimistic now. Also, let me use the example of my visit. Tomorrow I'm going to Bangalore in order to see the defense establishment and the defense ecosystem of India. And deep in my mind is to create synergies and cooperation with a small, but yet again quite ambitious Greek ecosystem and the Greek startup system. So I believe this is the way that Greek entrepreneurs will follow. There are a number of successful examples of cooperation. Let me give you one. I don't know how familiar you are with the European geography, but the biggest island of Greece is Crete. And we're building a very important new airport in Crete, in Kastelli. And this is a cooperation between a Greek construction company and an Indian company. So there are successful examples already, but we have to enhance that cooperation. And again, I believe the free trade agreement will help us by creating a regulatory environment which will make it easy for entrepreneurs to communicate easily within the huge possibility that both the Indian and the European economy allows.
Thank you, Minister. We certainly look forward to the FTA being implemented, and I must tell you, at least some of us in this room, on that fundamental principle of Greek sovereignty, that Greek olive oil is the best in the world and certainly the best in Europe, are firmly on the Greek side.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I'm a small producer myself, you know. I have 32 olive trees, but I believe the Indian market is rather vast for me to be able to export. Thank you so much.
Okay, sorry, I've just been told we have time for a couple of questions. So, 2 questions. Yes, sir, back there. If you could identify yourself.
Good morning and thank you. I am Davide Cucino from Fincantieri, a large shipbuilder in Europe and around the world. Minister expressed some, at least, concern and doubts about some European instruments in terms of how those instruments could enhance capacity production in Europe because of some deadline such as 2030. So would you think that potentially opening those instruments to non-EU countries that are undergoing discussion with UK, but India could be a potential other partner, could help to fill this capability and capacity production gap? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. It has, in my humble opinion, it has to work in 2 ways. First of all, allow third countries also to use those mechanisms, but under a very strict conditionality. And what is the conditionality? That those third countries do not create any kind of threat for the European Union or for any European Union member. Because, let me say, it would be quite awkward for the European Union, from its own budget, that is, from the budget created from the European citizens, to create threats against the European citizens. It is clear to all of us, I think, in this room, that India does not in any way qualify as a threat for the European Union or any European Union country. But that is not the rule for all the countries that aspire to use the safe mechanism. The other thing is that I see safe as an opening salvo. So, in my humble opinion, I believe that a second regulation has to come which extends not just the time limit, but also the amount of money which needs to be invested. In a way, ladies and gentlemen, in the modern society, defense is different than what it used to be. In the past, defense was tanks, fighter planes, maybe warships. It's not like that anymore. It's more defense now. It's much more a knowledge machine. And most elements in defense are dual-use elements. So by financing defense, you do not just finance articles that can only be used in war. It's much different nowadays. So I think you have read my mind, sir.
A very wise answer. Any other questions?
Yes, here.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Nikolas from Cyprus Forum. So Greece has been investing in startups in the defense industry, and I would like to ask whether you think that potential collaboration between with Indian companies could create more opportunities.
Thank you. Of course I do. That's why I'm here. Of course, I had the huge pleasure of meeting the Indian Foreign Minister, my friend Dr. Jaishankar, yesterday, and profit for his wisdom, and I'm meeting my counterpart, Minister Singh, on Monday. But one of the main reasons that I'm in Delhi and I'm going to Bangalore tomorrow is to create a corridor which both Greek and Indian ecosystem can use to cooperate with each other. Now, again, in the defense realm, the main thing now is ideas, new ideas. And new ideas are being mostly expressed by young, ambitious people that create startups, create new products, and help us move towards a different environment. We are dealing with an information now culture, and that's what we're trying to do. So creating cooperation between the two ecosystems is most important.
Thank you, Minister. I think
I have a question here. Excuse me.
Sorry, okay, that's the final question, please.
Yes, Małgorzata Bonikowska, Poland, the Center for International Relations, a think tank. Minister, following what you are saying, I just want you to comment on two things. One is that Commissioner Kubilius recently, Commissioner responsible for defense and for the space, started to talk about possibility of using this critical momentum for the EU to go further in defense and create, for example, base for the future, maybe even European army or deeper cooperation of the country, member states' defense, not only industries, but also defense structures. I want you to comment on that, if this is realistic in some time, obviously not immediately. And second is about Indo-Pacific and our region. Do you think if this is happening, what could be the ways not only France is present in the region of Indo-Pacific, but the EU is more engaged and shares more concerns as far as what we see from Indo-Pacific sides, but also in order to share our concerns from European side for the future security architecture?
Thank you. Yes, I know, of course, Commissioner Kubilius. I work closely with him in his efforts to enhance the existing capacities. As we all know, in the European Union, defense is the realm of individual countries. Yet again, it's becoming clearer by the day that unless we create common structures, we cannot go forward. So I'm totally subscribing to the creation of common structure and even a European army. I think this is needed. Now, as we speak, there is only one brigade between Germany and France, and I don't know if it's a paper brigade or an actual brigade. But for the European Union to be able to fulfill the promises of the European experiment, a common army, common armed forces, common structures needs to be created. Even a European common defense staff with a general and a real staff in Brussels. We cannot speak about common defense without common structure in defense. And about the Indo-Pacific, let us be frank. In modern age, geographical difference of the past make no sense. I see the world as a common security environment. And Europe cannot survive if, for example, the maritime routes in the Indian Ocean are not open. Let me give a small example of how the quality of life of the European citizen can be affected from something happening far away. The Houthis were able to interrupt the approach to the Suez Canal just last year and the year before. Now, you can say that does not affect the European citizen. That is not right. In my own electorate in Athens, when I'm preaching for the presence of the Greek armed forces in the Red Sea, and you know, we are not rich, we cannot be spendthrift. So for me, keeping a fleet south of the Suez is something very expensive. I have to explain myself to my Greek audience. I'm giving one example. Go to a Greek supermarket and watch the price of a plastic cup after the interruption of the communication in Suez. The price of a plastic cup went 10 times up because the ship carrying that cup had to go around Africa to come to Greece. So things that happen, I'm using that small example to show that things that happen in the Indian Ocean or in the Pacific Ocean affects us all in Europe. So understanding that our security needs are not limited to the European geographical space, but go far beyond, I think is absolutely essential. And if I may say so, not even the Earth is the limit. We have to watch the space as well, because threats may be coming from the space in the near future. So we have to understand, we have to comprehend that the world as we knew it is no more. And vast areas now have to be understood as challenges. Thank you.